Hey, it's Drybear. Today we're going to walk through the brand new mega dungeon for World of Warcraft Dragonflight Season 3, Dawn of the Infinite. Specifically, I want to talk about Murozond's Rise, and we'll have a separate guide for the other half of the dungeon, but as I'm pushing M+, I'm noticing a lot of pugs are falling apart in this dungeon, so let's walk through exactly how to do it. And as always, I'll try to make sure this is fast and snappy. In this version of the mega dungeon, you will land on the first platform with Tyr, and in my experience, it's best to pull all of these mobs. Now, depending on how many kicks you have in the group and how your healer is feeling, I like doing these in at least 4 pulls. Anything less, I think, is a little bit inefficient, but there can be some difficulties with killing the Time-Sworn Keeper, or if you have a lot of nasty casters in one group and not that many interrupts. Also, if you have a lot of ranged interrupts, like you have a bunch of casters and a hunter that have longer cooldowns and not that many melee interrupts, you may want to split these up a little bit, but I do recommend pulling this platform in 4 chunks. You can take the first 5 groups and pull them straight into the Time-Sworn Keeper and cluster them all together. You want to be careful about the casts that are coming out of these mobs and make sure that you pull them out of the guard that comes out of the Time-Sworn Keeper, and just be wary of the pat of the Vanguard that's coming around the corner. Then I like grabbing these Twilight Maguses and Vanguards on the left side and pulling them all together. Make sure you're kicking the AoE corrupting volley, and also make sure that when they do the dash where they put down the Time-Sworn puddle, that you jump into the puddle and kick to interrupt to save the person that's being channeled on. Which is perhaps the most important part of this, is you can very easily wipe if your healer or someone gets stuck inside of that channel and no one goes to interrupt it. Clear out the other 2 together and then move over to the Time-Sworn Maiden and take her down as well. Just be wary that she spawns an orb that she will send out into the distance, and after a short while it will return, and this orb does a ton of damage, so just make sure that melee are paying attention. As a tank, I like pulling it away from where she originated the orb so it doesn't come back to where we're standing, and just be wary of that. With the whole platform cleared, you're going to take on Tyr the Infinite Keeper, and he's pretty straightforward. The biggest failing point here for pugs is going to be dealing with the orbs that come out and head towards the center tower. Tank needs to make sure they don't get knocked off the edge when he does the frontal, and also when he does that slam, make sure you have high physical damage, as it will do a large chunk to you when you get hit. When he starts the temporal essence channel and you see these stolen time orbs all over the map, make sure everyone splits up and grab these. At high keys, if these ever touch the center platform, the center pillar, it will wipe the entire group. It does ridiculous damage, and imagine on Tyrannical it's going to be even worse. And ideally, you want to give these to your damage dealers, as it does give haste and movement speed, stacking up to 5 times. So you want your damage dealers to be grabbing these, but in general, you just make sure that no one lets a ball go through, because that will wipe the group. Next, run up and clear the Watchkeeper and the Marauder. If you're having a lot of trouble, you can cease the Marauder and focus on the Watchkeeper, as there will be a ton of AoE pulsing damage, to make sure your healer is prepared for this. Next, you'll run into this timed race mechanic where you'll go across. If you get hit by any of the orbs or the frontal cones from the Dragonkin, you will be reset back to the beginning. The best thing is kind of run towards the edges and change directions, as sometimes the projectiles from the little worms will actually predictively shoot towards where you're going, so changing direction helps a lot with that, and just make sure you get all the way to the end. If you have 1 or more party members that are struggling a little bit too much with this gauntlet, when you reach the end, you can channel on this little rift here. When it's done, it summons a portal at the beginning of the gauntlet that will allow anyone to teleport to the end without having to clear the gauntlet. So you really just need 1 or 2 people to finish fast, channel, create the portal, and then everyone else can come if they're having trouble getting through. Next, you'll have to deal with the double dragons, and this pull is actually pretty nasty. You have Diversionist and a Saboteur. There's a ton of AoE damage here, and the tank needs to face it off the platform, as there will be periodic cones, frontals that come out of these dragons, and they hurt real bad. You'll probably want to use cooldowns here for DPS, healer, and tank to get these guys down, especially on fortified weeks, as they do hit really hard. Next, you have this little gauntlet here, and your main goal with this one is, I see tons of people in my groups completely confused as to what's happening here. Your goal is to clear a path to the last, like the center 3 portals. You don't care about the first 2 on the sides. You want the middle, the left middle, and the right middle portals cleared to with a path, because you'll be taking all 3 of those in order to get to the bosses that come off this platform. The temporal deviations are the ones that will clear the area for you. You can't stand on the sand. Kill the fusions and the deviations, and when they die near the edge of the sand, it will clear sand for you, and you'll want to move through this gauntlet as fast as possible. Keep in mind that, in my experience, anything over key +10, healer runs into mana trouble about halfway through the gauntlet, so just be wary of that. If you have a healer that's burning or you didn't rest or drink, but after the 2 double dragon pull before this, they may have to drink halfway through the gauntlet, and you can do this just by chilling in an open spot. But just tanks, grab the mobs, take them to the edge of the sand and walk around. I like clearing the right side of the platform first, then clearing to the middle portal, and then lastly clearing to the last portal. You can pull really whatever you want, just be wary that the little mobs do explode in a large AoE, so don't make your healer suffer too much by pulling too many of these at once. The anomalies aren't really too big of a deal, and generally I try not to pull more than 1 Rift Mage at a time, as this will create a lot of extra damage coming out. But you want to kill all of the Rift Mages on the platform and clear a path to all 3 of the back portals, and once you've done that, you are good to go. Once all the portals are clear, you have the option of going left or right. You will have to do both of these anyway. The left option takes you to Anduin in the past, and the right option takes you to Morchie, which is the infinite version of Chromie, and you can kind of choose between those. Generally, I like doing Morchie first, as it's a little bit easier, but you can also clear all your way over to Anduin, which I think Anduin's a far harder fight for your healer and for your tank to stay alive and endure, so it's up to you on which one you want to pull. And one of the major downsides for this dungeon is that there's way too much trash, and a lot of it is in your way. So you actually start wanting to skip mobs towards the second half of the dungeon because you're so overcount, which means that if you have Shroud or you have Mind Soothe, you have Distract or things like that, allows you to get past mobs. For both these next 2 bosses, Anduin and of course Morchie, you can skip all the trash mobs along the way and you'll be just fine because you'll get your trash made up back towards the end of the dungeon. But if you have to clear it, my favorite way to do this, if you want to do it the safe way, is just to go to the boss, clear the first mobs that you get, and then backtrack back to the platform, go to the next boss, clear the first mobs that you get, and backtrack. And the reason we do that is because there's less mobs on the way to the boss, and then if you backtrack, since you're going to backtrack anyway, you don't have to clear the second half of the mobs that you run into as you keep clearing through the platforms. Just go to Anduin, backtrack back to the platform, go to Morchie, backtrack to the platform, and then finally for the last boss, you'll be going into the middle portal anyway, so you will want to end up in this teleporter platform anyway. For the Anduin fight, you'll start with the Alliance Destroyer, this big tank that you have to deal with. Overall, nothing too complicated here. He will spawn dwarven exploding mobs that you'll want to kind of kite around and deal damage to. You can usually just cluster them up and CC them because it will stop their fuse and then blow them up, and then just make sure they're away from enemies or teammates that are being dragged. You can use Ring of Peace here. You can use Binding Shot, things like that. They just keep them in place and then burn them down and you'll be good to go. Next, you'll want to grab the Paladin, the Silver Hand, and the 2 Alliance Knights that land down after the tank. You want to interrupt the Alliance Knights as they will cast a rally, and just be worried the Paladin is constantly consecrating the ground, so the tank will want to kite it around and keep it moving. Once done with that, Anduin will jump in, and he hits really hard, and his hardest mechanic is probably the Mortal Strike that he hits with. I'm sure even on Tyrannical it's going to be even worse, so just be wary that he has that. Use cooldowns on healer and tank to survive it, and then when the ads spawn, interrupt the extra caster, the Conjurer, and then just pick up the Footman and the Archer and burn them down with him. When he Blade Storms, stay away from it, and that's pretty much the whole fight. Then just skip past the next mobs or backtrack if you're going to be clearing them because you don't have a Shroud, and head over to the other portal, which is going to be Morchie. Now, Morchie is an incredibly simple fight, but this is the one that I see pugs mess up probably the most out of any of the dungeons in rotation right now. There's a few main mechanics to worry about. Firstly, she will always do a cone frontal on the tank, so they need to face away to make sure they don't hit the teammates with it. Then she will create illusions of herself, and this one is probably the one that confuses people the most. She will split in multiple versions of herself. Most of them, all of them except for one, will be wearing a hat, and then the one that looks normal is the one you have to stand on. They'll all start channeling, but the real one, when it finishes the channel, will do a giant frontal attack on the entire platform and deal a bunch of damage plus a dot that can hit really hard. So all you have to do is when she splits like this, look around, find the Chromie that's not wearing a hat that looks normal, and run behind her and stand behind her before the channel is completed. Now, if you're getting old like me and it's hard to see, remove your overhead bars, your threat plates, to make sure you can actually see Chromie, or just follow the group to make sure you're on the right spot. Just make sure you're standing behind the Morchie version that doesn't have a hat on. And her last mechanic, she will create clones of every person in the group that will just lock onto them and run towards them. All you have to do is run these clones into the time traps on the ground. They will stun and get stuck and stop moving for a while, and you can stay on the boss. And that's it. If you let your clone channel on you, you're going to die really fast. If you don't go to the right Morchie in time, you're going to die really fast. And this is a very easy fight that's also very easy to wipe on. Once you're done with Morchie, backtrack to the main platform or skip if you have Shroud and Vispot, things like that. Jump through the portal, go down the hill, and then turn to the right and head all the way over in front of the ice blockade here and take on the triple pull here with the Slayer and the Marauders. Run past this, go all the way through, turn left, and run against the wall, and you'll be at the final boss, and you should be very easily at count at this point. Chrono-Lord Deios is actually quite similar to Morchie in that he doesn't have that many mechanics, but if you mess them up, it can very easily wipe your entire group. Firstly, he does a periodic frontal cone in front of him that hits really hard. Make sure this only ever hits the tank. Then he'll spawn infinite orbs, and the way these work is they'll slowly fall down to the ground, and if they touch the ground, they'll explode, doing a bunch of damage to everyone in the group, and this stacks up in damage amount. So if you miss the first orb, it's going to do most of your health. If you miss the second or third, everyone's going to be dead. So you have to be catching these orbs regularly. But there's a trick to it. If you're standing underneath the orb, it falls slower. And so if you just go camp it early, you might have to wait longer. So if you're paying attention and you're kind of slick, you can step outside of the orb, let it fall, and right before it lands, jump in to make sure it doesn't take as long to hit the ground because you're already on top of it and ready to catch it. Then he will periodically spawn keepers that will run to a portal and open them up. You want to run to the keeper, burn them down, deal damage to them until they're dead, and then anything comes out of the portal, if you don't kill it fast enough, make sure you kill those off too. During this process, Deios will still be doing his frontal on the tank, so if you're the tank, make sure you're not aiming him at the group when you're transitioning over to the keeper at the portal, because you'll have everyone get cleaved by this giant frontal. And then you repeat this process of killing the keepers and catching the orbs until you get into the second phase. At this point, you just have to dodge the barrage that comes down from above until Deios lands back down on the ground. And at this point, he's just going to go a little bit harder on everything he's doing before, but it's all going to be the same process. The tank wants to be very careful about space here to make sure that there's enough room to move, as there will be more sand on the ground, but it's the same thing. Catch the orbs, kill any adds that come out, and keep that process going and make sure the frontal doesn't hit anyone but the tank. And that's it. That's all of Murozond's rides. It's not that hard. It's not too difficult. Hopefully this video helped you out. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.